Hello, this is Voodoo People. I'm a mapper in the Team Fortress 2 mapping community, and I made this map that you're currently looking at called Dom Carts. If you've played the final version, this may look somewhat recognizable because it's the very first version that was ever playtested. I was inspired to do this by another member of our community who goes by the name of Sandwich. Who he sort of gave a tour of the map and talked about his thinking and why things are the certain way that they are and like what he might do to change it. And I thought that was really cool. So I decided to make it for myself on this map that I've already finished. So I started mapping actually a very long time ago. I released a map in 2008 called CTF Highlands for regular TF2, and then after that I kind of stopped mapping. Um, Mostly just because I didn't really have a spot where I felt like I had a lot of places to get exposure, and I was going to university, and life just kind of was changing for me pretty quickly. So I put the mapping hobby on ice for a while, but recently I got back into it, and it really kind of just came flooding back more intensely than I ever could have imagined. You know, the joy of mapping, and I found this mapping community, and I started working on another map before this called Death Ray, which I ended up abandoning because I wasn't happy with where it was going. But then I started working on this, Dom Carts. It's now finished, and it's got a pretty good reception. Most people really liked it. Some people don't like the gimmick, but you're not going to please everyone. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I'm quite proud of it. But I thought I'd kind of give a bit of a tour of the map and talk about how I designed it, the decisions I made, like what worked, what didn't. This is actually the second time I'm doing this because, like an idiot, I started recording and I talked for like a whole 12 minutes with the microphone off. So here I am again, but maybe it was good to have a bit of a practice run. I could organize my thoughts a bit better. So anyway, let's get into it. So this is a map using domination logic, and that means that you have to control points, and the more points you control, the more points you get. It just ticks up automatically, and eventually you win by getting a certain number of points before the other team. The gimmick here, as you've probably seen already, is that the points are on carts that move around the map. This is not very typical for Team Fortress 2 or Team Fortress 2 Classic. There's probably someone who has done this before me. I doubt I'm the first, but I know there's PL Longboy, which follows kind of a similar concept, but it's not quite the same. There's also a Dom map, which the name escapes me at the moment, but it's like a train that goes back and forth, but it stops in either spot. This one just has the points continuously moving. And yeah, I have a hard time making a map that's purely conventional. I always like to throw in some kind of twist, some kind of gimmick. I try to do it in a way that's really subtle, a way that isn't really too wacky, too zany. Like, I don't really like to make meme maps, quote unquote meme maps. I like to make gimmick maps, and to me, this is a gimmick. I'm pushing the boundaries of what's considered acceptable canonical TF2 gameplay. So anyway, let's get into the map. So I'll start in the spawn room. The spawn room is, it's a spawn room. It's just a simple rectangle. But my main goal with this was that I really wanted to like mitigate spawn camping because nobody likes spawn camping, right? So there's many exits to spawn. There's 1, 2, 3, and actually 4. This one you leave and you get a height advantage looking down at your own base, as well as a sniper deck to challenge snipers over there. You go this way and you end up on this height advantage looking down at your own base, and a path to up here, which is kind of funny that I even included this because it's just so pointless. It's like, oh, let's go up here, and then like donk, like you just hit a wall. This became something more interesting in later versions, but I don't know, it was in flux. But anyway, so that's that exit, and then you have this exit which puts you inside this little sort of elevated building, which you can see out here, which similarly height advantage, but you're looking down over this area, which I called the kill box. I kind of imagined that you would kill the enemy team a lot in this box. It didn't really end up playing that way, but whatever. As well as these kind of windows, and then you get this covered path into mid. I kind of saw this as like the exit of last resort. If you can't get out of any exit at all, you've got this one. And this one, which is not really intended to be an exit, it's really meant to be more like a way to get back into spawn, since the rest of them come with height advantages. And so it's a bit hard to get up there. So that's why there's also a resupply locker here, so you don't have to waste all your time going all the way back up here to get resupplied. It's basically just behind this door and up this ramp. So yeah, let's talk about the bases. I would usually call this the yard. The whole thing is the base, and this is the yard. This kill box is kind of funny because you see these little gray blocks up here. So I'm a demo main, and I've been a demo main since like 2007, and I've always kind of felt like you can sometimes tell when mappers have a preferred class because they put lots of design elements in that suits the playstyle of that class. And that's no exception here. As a demo main, I really kind of wanted to put like sticky bombs up here, and as the enemy team is riding the cart, you get to reenact Beat the Demo Man, because the stickies are up there, you're here, and you go bye-bye. This didn't really work so much. The map doesn't really play that way. People don't really ride the cart for long periods of time. But it was my thinking at the time. I think I left this one, like the ones on the ends, in the final product. But yeah, they got the cut pretty early on. These walls also got lowered in the later version. And got a more interesting shape, because actually I managed to get it to be like exactly the right height where if you put a sentry right here, a level 1 sentry, it can target enemies, but it can't hit them. It just like shoots the top of this wall. So like, I don't know, this is kind of funny. Just make sure you keep in mind the very precise heights of your walls, because there's little things like that in TF2 where, I don't know, a sentry can just shoot a wall helplessly trying to target an enemy, and it can't do it. So there's a death pit here. Right now it's just a blue, I imagine it kind of being like water. It became something a lot more dramatic in the final version. I'm a big fan of environmental deaths in TF2. I think that they're really funny and dynamic, and they're kind of the most memorable moments. So I knew I wanted to have like a very narrow portion of the track, which goes over a death pit. In fact, my first idea for this map was actually that it would be on the top of a very tall, very narrow mountain. Kind of like a map called Peak in Unreal Tournament 1999, if anybody remembers that game. Or maybe like Upward, but like way more narrow. I ended up kind of abandoning this because I felt like it was maybe a bit too ambitious and a bit too much for something which already comes loaded with a pretty unexpected gimmick. But I managed to work it in here. Just this segment, of course, if you fall down there, you die. And it's a very dangerous spot to be. Let's see what else. These angled windows. Actually, no, I'll talk about those when I get to mid. I'll talk about those later. I imagine teams sort of fighting in a clockwise pattern. Excuse me. And they would go up this ramp and fight on their way to mid. It didn't really work out that way, because this tunnel is actually like a nightmare to push up, especially when the cart's going up, because the cart actually gets in your way. And you just basically are just eating spam the whole way up. So it's like around this point, players actually kind of abandon the cart, and they prefer to try and like take it back over here, which makes sense, and I'm kind of happy about that, because it like puts more people in this death pit area, which leads to more exciting, memorable gameplay moments. But that was a bit of a failure of design here, is putting this narrow hallway here, because it's just suicide trying to go up here. I mean, you're just firing spam down here. And these walls that you can see through, these metal grates, they ended up changing pretty quickly, because as you stand here, like, you can see where the enemy is, and you see when they're going to come around the corner. So like, this is just such a devastating position to have that it needed a lot of reworking. Oh yeah, there's some culling issues there. I'm not really sure what caused that, but they got fixed in later versions. Going back to like designing maps for your preferred class, as a demo main, I wanted to have lots of like sticky jump and rocket jump advantages. So like, you get like, this is playable space up here, and this is also playable space over here. I kind of wanted there to be advantages to mobility, but eventually, like during the play tests, people would get up here as a sniper from a jump pad and like think like they'd report it, like, oh, I found an exploit. Oh, look, I'm not supposed to be here, and it's like, no, you are supposed to be there. It's just not so obvious. So eventually, I added some ramps and some like easier ways to get up to these spots, because I actually intended it to be playable space. So let's see what else. These walls, these tall walls, actually were kind of a mistake, in my opinion, when I made it. I didn't really think much about what the visual theme of the map was going to be, and I didn't think much about the 3D skybox, and so I just sort of put these walls in. And that kind of made the map into, like, a pit. And maybe that influenced my final decision to make it kind of like a dirty old scrapyard. But I found it difficult to integrate the 3D skybox because I had basically given no thought to like how I'm going to design the area, which is not part of the 3D skybox, but is like the spot which is non-playable space, but is in the regular map, the sort of transitional area. And it's not impossible. Like, I'm sure that more experienced mappers than I would have had no problem doing this, but I hadn't given much thought to that, and I think that it probably would have been smart to like design that space alongside the actual map, even this early in development. My reasoning was just that, like, that has nothing to do with gameplay. Who cares? I'll deal with it later. And when I dealt with it later, I was regretting the decision. So, add your transition spaces into your map early. Okay, so let's talk about mid. So, when you come up to mid here, this whole area, I remember I didn't really know what to do with this. I didn't want this to be like an easy sight line to like abuse enemy spawn with, but I also didn't want it to be completely blocked off, so I put these boxes here kind of awkwardly. Like, they're so weirdly placed. I ended up doing something much different here later. But, yeah, so I was never really too happy about this, and I think I fixed it a lot better later. You know, I put this cover here so that way you wouldn't be completely exposed coming out. But I kind of imagined teams sort of having this as a staging area where they push into the enemy base. And that just didn't really happen. I ended up putting a wall here later, you'll see in the final version. But, yeah, this mid got reworked a lot, especially this room. This is what I called the mid room. And this got changed the most out of the entire map. I didn't really know what to do here initially. I added these blocks with ramps, and I thought maybe engineers would put sentries here. But, you know, they didn't. And these windows, I wanted to have these kind of like angled walls because I thought, for one, they looked cool and they gave a better view down onto the yard. But the problem is that in the source engine, like when you bump up against these things, like you start to surf and it like disturbs the player's movement. And also, it's really hard to like get a rocket jump in here perfectly. Like, really good players are, you know, they're really good and they can rocket jump or sticky jump and they get into the window every time. But like, you know, more amateur players, the problem is that if you miss, normally in TF2, if you try to rocket jump into a window, like if I were to try and rocket jump up here, I hit a flat wall, and just by holding W as you go down, you get in, right? Here, you hit this, and it's like, unless you're like an airstrafe god, you're not getting in here. So I ended up changing that to be a flat wall later on, and actually adding a balcony. Because as cool as it was, and as much as it broke my heart to get rid of it, I had to replace it with a flat wall. So yeah, I'm not really sure what else there is to say about this. I don't think I'll make a video for like every version of Dom Carts because the changes were very incremental, and I think pretty much everything I added stayed in one way or another. Like, there was nothing that I really added and then took out later because I didn't like it. Maybe, I guess, just the last couple remarks. You know, like there was a big problem early on where you could get stuck in the ground really easily because like the source engine and moving brushes, like, they do not get along, especially when player collision gets involved. Like, people were getting stuck around right here, like in these walls here. When I changed the ground later to be a displacement, people were getting stuck in the displacements. Like, it was a mass burial. Like, it was just a massacre here. We ended up fixing that later with some methods. After a lot of trial and error of solutions which did not work, there was finally a much simpler solution, which I'll talk about in the final version. But yeah, that was a big challenge, was to have this be in a state which was actually enjoyable to fight around this cart. In this current version, if you stand on it, like, you as the player, like, your view will move with the cart, which is technically like what you'd expect normally physically. Like as you go around here, you'd be like turning like this as you follow this thing, and you'd think that that would be more natural, but it's not. The payload cart doesn't do this in a payload map, and they do that with a special entity, which I'll talk about later. But that was like one of the first like huge complaints people had, was that like it's actually kind of like nauseating to ride the cart for too long. So yeah, I think I've talked about everything that I wanted to talk about. Yeah, I think I have. So I'll see you in the next video.